The idea of the long-dead, hyper-advanced civilization is not a foreign concept to science fiction. And through all the shows, books, and movies, we have many examples of what these hyper-advanced civilizations might leave behind for us. The television series Stargate focuses a lot on this, where the team SG-1 goes out to all sorts of worlds across the galaxy to find all sorts of neat technologies left behind by the ancients. But of course, all they ever seem to find is research facilities and cool gadgets. I like fancy technology and gadgets just as much as the next guy, but I mean, what would we realistically find of a hyper-advanced civilization? One thing that gets it more right than you might think is the Halo series of books and games. The human civilization in that universe, under the United Nations Space Command, seem to constantly be stumbling on the various megastructures left behind by their forerunner civilization. And talking about the remains of a hyper-advanced civilization, the word megastructure is the thing to pay attention to. In all the movies and books and video games that feature hyper-advanced civilization, long dead or not, they always seem to be heavily planet-based. A thing that is missed by these kinds of depictions with planet-centered empires is just how likely it is for a hyper-advanced civilization to construct its own place of habitation. Civilizations in science fiction depict it as building megastructures and other substantial space-borne habitats are always the god-level civilizations. But the thing to realize is the human race, today, on this Earth, have the ability to build the megastructures I shall list further. Those fantastic feats of engineering always shown to us to be the work of godlike civilizations is actually quite possible and very likely. I say we can build it now, but it would still be difficult. But it's to say that any advancements in technology would not make megastructures possible, it would only make the task easier. One of these megastructures we could possibly find is something called a Dyson sphere, a massive spherical structure built all around a star. The structure, like one gigantic solar panel, is meant to harvest every little bit of energy that sun kicks out of it. We, the human race, right now already find reason to harvest just the fraction of the solar energy we get just from the surface of our Earth. Based on that, a caged sun would go a long way to solving any kind of power issues a civilization might have. I'm personally a bit sentimental, so I probably wouldn't want to cage and darken the entire solar system that our race and civilization were born and bred under, but maybe the sun of a dead solar system with no life in it, I wouldn't feel so bad about that. We might also find things like Dyson swarms. As the Dyson part of its name suggests, it still surrounds a star, but instead of one big spherical solar panel, instead we have a swarm. Now that swarm can be made up of individual solar panels, but it could also be made up of individual habitats in space. You can imagine these like cities on the surface of the Earth, little islands of civilization in the great expanse of space. I know me personally, I find the idea of living on a space station my entire existence to be terribly dystopic, but rest assured, the civilization facing the horrible consequences of overpopulation would be very tempted to expand into the virtually limitless amount of space that surrounds a star. You can imagine a big cloud of little space stations floating all around a star, each one of them with, say, enough solar panel real estate to self-sustain their own power needs. Hell, they could even grow their own food. Another thing we might find of these hyper-advanced civilizations is my personal favorite, ring worlds. A massive ring set to spin so as anything on its surface can have something of a simulated gravity. These rings might be about 1 astronomical unit in radius. That way you get your ring in the Goldilocks zone that makes at least human life so possible, and from there you can grow your crops on the surface of this ring world. While it might not be as an efficient use of space as the Dyson swarm, which can expand drastically, the ring world is a little more limited. But what the ring world offers is a freedom of mobility. Space. It's still a drastic upgrade from what a planet can offer in terms of available space, but the ring world still maintains a certain luxury of open space, allowing the human to not feel so cramped inside a space station. I know these feats of engineering seem more unreasonable than even the civilizations found in books, TV shows, and movies. But the important thing to know as to why I say megastructures are more realistic is because it does not depend on the discovery of a technology that may never exist. In science fiction, we see lots of examples of huge interstellar empires all centered on planets spread across hundreds of star systems. But a civilization of that nature would be dependent on the invention of a faster-than-light travel. Through warp theory, and thus warp travel, we have an idea of how we could travel distances faster than light would. But the problem is the energy cost. We do not have, nor do we even see, the ability to supply that much energy that we could actually bend space. And because of that energy cost, we may simply never have a way to travel faster than light. If it is possible, then there will have been civilizations that will likely have been able to do it. But if it's impossible, then nobody could. It should be noted, however, that it is not impossible to reach other star systems, only that it would take enormous amounts of time, even lifetimes, to reach the closest ones. So instead of the empires that span hundreds of star systems and hundreds of planets that we see in science fiction, we would more likely see civilizations that span maybe a handful of star systems, but what they do is they overdevelop those handful of star systems. They milk the resources those star systems has for every bit of living space. Instead of overpopulating the one habitable world you might have in a given solar system, you might be tempted instead to make a much more comfortable existence for yourself in orbit of your star system, or maybe on a ring world. The reason being that you don't want to have to travel lifetime kinds of distances just to reach the other parts of your civilization. You're going to be highly tempted to keep everything as local as possible. In a world with no FTL, there will be no huge multi-star system empires. There will not even be a handful multi-system star empires. There will be colonies. Those colonies' relation to each other would be much like colonialism on Earth, in that if you were a colonist going off, you weren't coming back. Wherever you end up, you had to be self-sustaining because there was no going home. On Earth, the limitation for a colonist was technology. There was no technology for phoning home. There was no technology for getting home, at least quickly. The sailboat was very slow. In space, it would be physics that would be your limitation, for which the laws of nature, there is no technology that will overcome them. Now, I know all the predictions I've made here today are dependent on an idea that these civilizations will be basically determined by their environment, which is the laws of physics. And I know that I've made many videos about how cultures and civilizations are not determined by their environment. But any sufficiently advanced civilization will probably work with what they've got. Yes, civilizations, cultures can live unsustainably, can grind against the physical limitations of their environment. Hell, just look at our culture. But if the laws of nature simply say no, then there's nothing even the most unsustainable beings could say. If a civilization can truly be called hyper-advanced, then surely they have found a way to at least work with the laws of physics rather than against them. Take where I come from, for example. Where I live, it is winter, and if not winter, then very cold most of the year. And that means most of the year there are no plants. They are dead. They do not grow anything. So what have civilizations living in these kinds of climates done about the limitation? Well, we design our entire agriculture around the fact that stuff doesn't grow most of the year. We design everything to take as much advantage of the growing period as possible. And I imagine if there were no seasons, then we would just grow things all year round. We would, instead of growing everything all at once, we would have things come to harvest every so often, staggered throughout the year. Just as several habits of us northerners molded by the seasons, so too will spacefaring civilizations be molded by the physical limitation of not faster than light travel. So I've come to realize that several of my videos, and even myself, I intend to go in talking about something specific, like this video for example, but I end up talking about theory. I can't really help it. In trying to explain to you why something is the way it is, I end up having to go into the logic behind it all, the theory that explains it all. I want to teach you as best I can, so I would never want you to go into the world with a superficial understanding of something. But I suppose explaining it in the way that I did, in the idea that I approach theory by talking about something specific, I suppose when you say it like that, it kind of sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? But maybe you, my dear viewer, consider it a bit of a distraction. Maybe you would rather I stay very close to the topic. Feel free to tell me, or anything else you might like to discuss in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.